Hey folks, this is Mike Tholfsen from the Microsoft Education team. I'm coming at you from this nice beach in my background, and we are here today to kick off our inaugural very first, and so we're very excited to be coming at you today to talk about our whole new remote learning and distance learning with Microsoft Education. And so what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be your host, and we have some great guests today. I'm going to share my screen and show you some of the things that we're going to be doing. So to kick off, this is our first ever one, like I mentioned. I'm Mike Tholfsen on the education team. Feel free to follow me if you're not already following me out, very involved. And this is going to be the agenda for today. And we're going to have a similar type of agenda typically. We'll have the latest news and updates. Shay is actually going to be talking about our new remote learning community. And actually, Justin Shando, unfortunately, he had to cancel at the last second, but Shay is going to cover for him as well to talk about teams in this remote learning community. And then we've got an educator, Geri Gillespy, who's done amazing work with teams at scale in her district. So that's going to be the normal way that we do these events, and we're going to be doing them daily starting out, is we have a Microsoft internal team member talking about the topic. And then we bring on an education expert and someone who is out there doing this every day in the world of education as our second guest. And so we're going to cover lots of different topics, and we have some future webinars that are going to be coming up that we'll talk about at the end. So we'll be going things like deployment. We'll be having a Flipgrid folks on talking about family in the future. We'll be talking about other educators and doing remote PD and staff collaboration. With that, just before we get started, and again, there's so many resources out there right now, a lot of great resources. We really want to make sure that everyone always has access. These are 3 key resources right now. Make sure you go to the main Microsoft EDU remote learning site. We've got a great Teams EDU quick start guide, and Shay is going to be talking about that in just a little bit. And then also, for those of you on this call, you're likely already in this remote learning community, but if you have others out there who want to join the community, we have this link right here. And so join our remote learning community, and Shay is going to be talking about that a bit more very soon. And so always make sure these 3 links are great ones to remember. In terms of today's updates, these are the top 3 things we want to talk about today. And I'm not going to be going in deep, but I will mention them. Just yesterday, some great work by Justin Shando, Angela Chin, and the engineering team of both Teams and Canvas came together to allow Teams meetings to be integrated into Canvas calendar items. So great integration with Teams and Canvas together. There's a bunch of information on the blog and the tweets and everything out there. It's just starting to roll out that allows you, if you're already using Canvas, to integrate Teams meetings. Another thing that is a top issue we're hearing a lot about is, hey, I'm new to Teams. I'm creating meetings. I want to be able to control more. If I'm the teacher, who's the student, who can mute who can add people to meetings, who can't add people to meetings. We have a great support document, Teams meeting roles, right here, this link. And so if you're new to the world of Teams and meetings and setting things up, that's a great document to share around your district or your school. And lastly, there's so many resources out there right now. We've put together a Wakelet, which is a resource aggregation tool. And we have a nice Wakelet put together that curates all the great resources that you can go use right now, whether you're IT admin, whether you're an educator. We have parent resources. We have resources for inclusion and ELL students. So lots of great resources on that remote Wakelet. Now with that, that's today's news. We're going to switch over to Shay Harris from our engagement team. And Shay is going to take control of the screen. So Shay, I'm going to kick it over to you.
Hello, everybody. I am Shay Harris, and you can hopefully see my teams. I am going to walk you through some exciting new things. We're going to start with, if you're seeing this, you're obviously part of our new Enable Remote Learning community. The reason we created this community is because we wanted to make the world seem a little smaller. We wanted to give you all the resources, get you the help that you needed to be successful with teams in the quickest way possible and at the same time, show you the power of Teams. So with the Enabling Remote Learning team, we created it just over a week ago. We have not done any marketing about this other than word of mouth to get the right people into the new team to help you with your remote learning objectives as we move into this new frontier. So if you look at the Enabling Remote community, we've set it up with a bunch of predefined channels. And this is an interesting way for you guys to see how channels work. In the introductions, we've also pinned a Meet Our Teams. We've leveraged the Flipgrid app that you can pin to the top of your channel to say hello. And if you go down, you get to actually meet all of us that are monitoring this team on a minute-by-minute basis around the clock, hoping to give you all the answers to your questions. If we go into the announcement section, this is actually a locked down section for us to control to give you information about what's happening and what's changing. So here's the remote webinar that we're doing right now. The elephant in the room, the spam email. I have to apologize on behalf of our entire team that many of you were inundated with spam email. This was an unfortunate incident that we have now corrected. It took us longer than we had hoped, but you will no longer be receiving spam email. It was a great lesson for us. We're learning right along with you, and it is now taken care of, and we hope to never do that to you again. Let's go into deployments. So Deployment Channel has a full set of gurus on the back end that are watching and answering your questions in relation to how do I set up teams? How do I get started? What's the right way for me to think about settings, profiles, etc. Teams creation and structure. You're going to find tons of conversations in here that are talking about how do I think about my channel structure? What's the right way in a remote learning community or managing a remote learning classroom to use those channels? And the idea is the community has lots of good experience that they're willing to share. And it's been very rewarding to go through and look at these individual channels and see just how people are helping each other, community helping community. Running a remote class, this gets you into the weeds of how to actually set up and host those classes online. You can go through and see the tips and tricks from your fellow community members on the best practices for running a remote class, meetings, settings, recordings, etc. Staff collaboration. This is a space that's mostly for them to have conversations around staff collaborations. Professional development and training. This is all helpful tips and tricks about how to quickly and easily get your staff trained to use Teams. Whether it's between staff members, staff and faculty, it's about staff communication, or it's actually getting in there and doing classroom management with teachers and students. There's links to the MEC courses. There's links to, which is our Microsoft Educator community. There's links to our Help and Learning Center for teachers and for students, and more. We also have the assistance requests. This is if you happen to have logged a bug and you're having problems getting traction or getting results, you can log a request here and we will do our best to track it down. School and system leaders, this is all about, this is for leadership to really think through how do they prepare an entire district to go Teams in a very short period of time. And finally, my favorite is the Your Stories. In this channel, you can see here, there's a story from Norway about specifically their experience in 2 days of working with Teams in a remote learning environment. Next, I'm going to jump over and I'm actually going to now give you a walkthrough of how to think about using Teams in a remote learning setting. For example, if you're familiar with, I'm going to just do a top level overview. On the left, we call this your left navigation. These are all pinned applications that are specifically for you, your activity, your chats, your teams, etc. When you think about it, maybe you're just going to need Teams as a communication platform. The chat functionality can keep you and your peers, staff and teachers and their students, they could keep everyone in sync just if you just wanted to leverage the chat functionality. The ability to use one-on-one chats, or you can do group chats. And the nice thing about group chats is it's super easy to then name that group chat, and maybe helps to keep you organized. So maybe Michael and Rudy and I are the math teachers, and we're talking about how we're going to handle remote learning for our students and how we want to, the three of us are going to communicate and collaborate. Maybe we're just going to call this the math experts. And you can save that as your group chat. It makes it far easier in your list of chats to go ahead and find your math experts group channel. You can also pin them by simply clicking the little ellipses and pinning that, and it will select them to be at the top of your pinned group chats. When I go into Teams, many of you, I'm sure, are just trying to figure this out. The nice thing about the Teams for Education version of Teams is you get lots of choices for how you use and start using Teams. So for example, if we want to start and create a new team, you're going to see that you get 4 actual team types. You get a class type, a professional learning community type, staff, and others. So think about this in your remote learning environment of creating the right teams for the groups that you're trying to get together. If I'm thinking about my class, each one of these types honors the relationship for the type of group it is. So for example, in a class, there's a teacher and students. It honors the relationship that the teacher has full control over that team, and meaning they can delete any kind of message that's posted by any other person. They can mute a student at any time, and more. Professional learning is much more about collaboration amongst peers. This environment is a great way for teachers to stay connected, to have conversations about what's working well, things that they've tried in this new frontier. The staff team type is all about, again, honoring that hierarchy between maybe your principals and teachers or superintendents to principals. And there's lots of custom experiences in these team types. For example, there's a custom OneNote notebook that is a companion to each one of these team types. Another is your generic team type. So when we think about it, how am I going to use, I've got all these teams here now, I come on day one, I feel a little overwhelmed. Well, maybe I want to filter and get organized. Maybe I just want to think about my classes right now. And for that one, I got algebra's up next, and maybe I just want to think about algebra. So I go into algebra, and you can see that the new landscape is really about keeping you focused. On the left here, we've got our channels, and you can see how this teacher has set up her channels to be by kind of interesting topics, EDSB, or extra credit corner and the homework help. And she's gone ahead and posted all of her, or tabbed all of these key things that she wants her class to have easy access to. So when you're thinking about keeping students connected and engaged, everything is right there at their fingertips. When I go into class notebooks, this is the integrated digital OneNote notebook that comes with a class team type. And when you go ahead and set that notebook up, you're going to have one-on-one folders between teacher and individual students. Now, the students don't get to see each other's notebooks, but the teachers get to see them all. And there's so much more we could go through in here, but this is supposed to just give you a general overview of how to think about setting up and using your team in a remote learning environment. And to finish my section, I want to talk about what Mike alluded to at the beginning, which is this quick guide. So maybe Teams still seems a little bit overwhelming. We're going to hand off a link for you to get started very quickly. It will give you all of the key areas of UI to think through and learn to navigate when you are learning how to use Teams in a remote setting. So with that, that's all I'm going to cover today. There'll be more tomorrow and the days to come. We hope it was helpful. Geri?
Hello, everyone. I'm so glad to be here. Yes, like Shay said, my name is Geri Gillespy. And honestly, today I am just transitioning into this team new. I'm coming to you today as a fellow educator. I've been in education for over 23 years. And in my previous role as the administrator of digital integration, I really was responsible for trying to do what everyone's doing right now. How do I leverage digital tools to support my staff and my students to make learning happen? So I'm going to talk about what we did in our district and what I did at scale to service all of the students and staff in our district. I had to figure out how I was going to support 57 buildings and 41,000 students and 4,000 staff members, all in this type of transition. Also, I'm going to talk about too, because right now, some of you might have been using Teams in the classroom. However, you were not used to this now new type of environment where we're using it on a daily basis to have to go ahead and have remote learning every day. So let's look at some resources that we have here for you. I added a lot of information in here about different ways we used Teams. I've been working with Teams for the last 3 years. In my role in our digital integration team, we actually started out with collaboration in reaching out, but I've provided here some other examples of how we used this tool in our district. When I started in this position 5 years ago, I started really paying attention to how technology and digital tools were used out in everyday life in people's jobs. They were fluid. They were part of what people did. It wasn't another place that people needed to go. It wasn't something else added to their plate. It was something that fit right into their workflow of their day. That's what we appreciated about Teams and the whole Office 365 educational suite. Everything fits together and makes your day fluid. And that is really what's going to be key in helping everyone figure out now, while we're moving to remote learning, how to bring these tools together so that they're able to keep that fluid level of instruction going the best that we can. I know being in the classroom, being a principal, a past principal, you're not going to replace, of course, that day-to-day connection. However, this is really going to help you come close to supporting your community right now and the learners as we get through this all together. So it still comes back to those questions for us, right? We still want to know we still want to make sure we're looking at what students know, how they've learned it, what are we going to do if they haven't learned it yet? You know, how are we going to make sure that our students have access to this information? So bottom line, as we move over into this remote learning, we still have to look at instruction, and that again, because teachers are always there for their students, administrators are there for their students. That's why we do what we do every day. So I'm going to talk about ways that we can use Teams in order to set that foundation for your teachers, your staff, your students, so that we can keep the learning moving forward. So now when we look at here, I want you, I put some information here and I want you to look at really that cycle, what teachers are going through right now, if you're supporting any of them, trying to wrap their head around, and we're looking at productivity. Right? So if we looked at that productivity, this is what happens in the beginning of the school year. And that's where a lot of people, I know questions that have come to me have been, hey, how do I set up a class in Teams? You know, it's similar to if we crossed over what those questions that we have in the beginning of the school year when we come back usually in August, right? What is my classroom setup going to be? What is my instructional calendar going to be? How does my content look? Who am I going to be able to set up? What are the expectations? And a lot of the resources we have, especially in the remote learning, talk about ways to set up that classroom, ways to set up that remote classroom in Teams so that you can have some productivity and some workflows for yourself and for your students. The next area is where a lot of teachers go to is that collaboration piece, because once we've got our classroom set up, we're thinking, how are we going to connect to the people around us? How am I going to connect to my staff if I'm a building leader? How am I going to connect to my grade level or my department support system? How am I going to connect to my students? How am I going to connect to my parents? Again, there are resources there about thinking about how I can use Teams to be able to do that, using the meetings app and setting up class meetings, being able to use those chat features as Shay showed, and being able to meet with your fellow teachers or departments or staff members. And then the next thing you're going to want to talk about or think about is that digital citizenship piece. These are the expectations of what's going to happen while you're in that remote learning class. How are students going to respond to an answer? How are students going to join a class? What is that schedule going to look like? What is the expectations to what you're going to have for your remote learning classroom? Once you start thinking that, go back to what you know. And this will help, especially if you're trying to support those teachers or rolling this out throughout a whole school, a whole district, to go back to what your teachers know. They are master at what they do. It's just applying what they know back to a different medium to be able to get that out to their students. Then we really look at that instructional support and how we're going to use these pieces and these parts. Getting into assignments, how are you going to assign? How are we going to embed maybe the tools that we have, the applications we have, like the access to Flipgrid or the class notebook, using assignments to be able to share information and get those out to students. To pull that back in. There are lots of resources for that too that we have out available, and I know that Mike's going to share some places where you can get access to these resources, but this is where you want to look at your workflow of how you want your students to be able to consume the information that you're producing in your team so that they in turn can produce something back. That is really what we're trying to do, is to have that transfer of knowledge and information and application where we start where we have our producers of information as our teachers and our staff, and then students are allowed to consume that information to be able to take it in, learn how to master it so that they can apply those skills and then produce themselves. So it's thinking about the lines of how you're going to follow that flow for that instructional support. And then the ownership and learning and the college and career success that happens along with that, that is just going to follow along with you as long as you follow through this cycle of being able to think and set out ahead of time what you want this to look like. If you are there in supporting your people, get to really know the people that are there and listening to their questions. I always say, know your people. We've sent out surveys to collect information, have them ask them how they've set up their systems before. For example, if they use documents a lot and relied on a lot of self-made documents, talk about being able to store their documents in their class materials folders in their teams instead of having to rework a lot of information. If they used a lot of class handouts or online links, then they're going to want to use more of the class notebook to be able to add those kind of materials in. Have teachers reflect on where going back to what they used to do in their system so that they can set up that same kind of workflow in their remote learning. It's okay if you are a support person, instructional coach, a technology coach, an administrator. Like I said, some quick surveys to see where your staff is at, where your students at, because that goes a long way to figure out what kind of support they're going to be needing after that. Build a network of collaboration and support. This is really, really key. You want to really make sure that you're using those tools like the remote learning community to ask questions and reach out to people. Don't be afraid to reach out to us here at Microsoft. We're here to help. Build a network between your teachers, if you can, between any of your departments, your administrators, leadership teams, really building that network of collaboration and support. We are all in this together. It goes a long way in being able to support people as they're moving to this remote learning, into this remote learning place. And I think Mike, I was going to go ahead and talk about some other areas of where you can find those resources to make those connections in the network that I was talking about.
There we go. Sorry about that. So this is Mike again, and hopefully my screen is coming through. Just as a recap of just the top resources we talked at the beginning, this is again our very first show, so we're just kind of getting the basics down. But our remote learning site, our quick start for teams that Shay showed. And then this is more for other people who haven't yet joined the community. Definitely share this link out. And what we're going to start doing is every day, and I just posted, I'm going to post the PowerPoint in a library that you'll be able to get. This is a temporary location, but you can download the PowerPoint from today right here, and we'll have a place where you can put all the PowerPoint links and videos. We're just getting it up and running, and we'll get back to you soon on where to get that. And then also, just a reminder, you can go directly for an educator or a school that needs real quick support, and maybe you don't have Premier support. You can go to this link right here, and we have support agents. And so make sure to share that link amongst your school. And then in the future, and right now the future is, we're only planning these at a couple days at a time because this is brand new. So this is our inaugural event. We will be doing more, and we'd love to hear ideas that you have about what you want to learn about. But over the next couple of days, tomorrow we're going to be doing IT admin and deployment. We're going to have Bill Sluss and Russell Long from our end. And then we're going to be having Scott Tipsing, educator out in the New Jersey area, talking about what they've done with deployment and administration and training. On Thursday, we've got the Flipgrid folks. We're going to have Charlie Miller, Joey, Ann, and Jess. They're always a ton of fun. And then on Friday, we're going to be talking about staff collaboration and distance learning. And this will get updated with more and more people and events as we get it figured out. But the lucky folks who are on today, this is our experimental version. So hopefully every time it'll get better. We're learning. We want your feedback on how to do this even better because we're brand new to it. We're really just trying to get the information out to our community and help everyone be more successful. So thank you very much, and we will see you soon. Goodbye.